Hello, Americans. When you hear them speaking about violent extremists, these are people changing and faking digital, which actually digitally recorded on Facebook. There is an O'Neill woman and the men with an O'Neill family and with the intelligence community, with a whole bunch of other police officers, also one with the name Lord. I don't know his name yet. Someone just dropped the name Lord in a comment to me, and they said meds. People are there's a Leahy family that faked conversations with me that weren't at all. They don't even know me when I was a kid and now. They weren't even in the same grade as me. The people that were above my grade and below my grade, they used to hang out with my neighbors. I didn't even know them. Then John McMahon, after I said, and the only reason I stayed back, it's recorded, a woman increasingly involved with FBI Director Robert Luskin, involved with Washington, D.C. people and other police forms and writing forensics, involved with people all along Route 175 that were involved and conjunctions to it, right? And conjunctions to Route 3, like the state judicial branch offices, and like town lines, like Wethersfield and Hartford, right where the Connecticut corrections offices are. They're increasingly involved with people at Hartford Hospital, with the intelligence community, where they're putting fake things in databases, fake evidences, changed evidences, and collusions. And they were refusing to identify themselves legitimately, interbranch, and communicate with me. They pretended through the mail to other people they had conversations with me, like this Leahy family, and one's named Lombardo. Increasingly, people tied to them involved with a Collo house near me and a Smith house, with the police confessions in their own, and a whole bunch of people tied to them. I don't know the names of them. They have roles of foreign and domestic military, the Eastern States Narcotics Drug Task Force, involved with the Connecticut, the Wethersfield Community Center, and the town offices, and the Wethersfield Police that faked conversation with me at the police station as a kid, now as an adult. Think about that. They're going to put you on extremism because you say something. Meanwhile, every time they speak for their own countries and our side speaking for our own, they're leaving out black people's rights of eyes and saying what needs to be said to get away with that. And that's inseparable from. They have our founders' communications replaced, and our founders communicated for themselves plural to be understood as James Madison as his plan, singular, as him singular. So this wouldn't happen, but it happened though, because you guys left. Even though it's declassified, our founders declassified how and why they didn't have free speech. Everyone had to hide their motives for roles with the American Revolution. Everyone who didn't have roles with the torture, extortion, in fact, human nature slavery, therefore physically, of everyone else and of themselves, then they were sensed by the breaching method through ourselves. We are now a human species body of individual bodies, now no longer as the system that shows us what generates all group differences. And so nature shows us instead that, but demonstrations of how we have been system stacked ulterior from its own, how it communicates with us, like how we have black people's rights of eyes, to have that stayed inseparable from any proper treatment of slavery, for example, when they bring that subject up and leave that out. Nature itself, what our founders communicated for it too, not just with telling us to see the whites of eyes before we shoot, telling us. There was a human fact human nature breaching method that reassigned what nature communicates, made everyone pretend other or otherwise sense for the breaching method, as you guys still do. So Fox News has rules of the logic teacher I had who did a little trick in the hallway, so he wouldn't get caught for it. And God knows what they put in the paper. Well, tactically delusions Roth, this guy too. A Parker English, increasingly involved with Marines, involved with the World Trade Center attack too. And in other words, and you guys are attacking the president's mental health. Even when you pick things out that are right, which I've never heard. You don't deal with real premises. You don't deal with the exceptions properly at the same time. Even when you deal with, in other words, I'm not defending the president. No, but I'm saying all you guys have delusions in place. While you have simultaneously criminally foreign influence, fact, treating nature, quality aspects in nature, as you have entertained and have had entertained treatments and uses of the words like extremism after the World Trade Center attack, where they pretended we wanted roles with torture. You guys have people in the background speaking at crimes at Central Connecticut State University that are putting fake things in databases at between campuses. I only know people making confessions tied to a Joe DeMauro on my campuses behind my back. And I don't even know who says that. Someone will say something and walk away. No, but I only saw him one time on my campus in grammar school. He's increasingly tied to proven child abusers, leaders, and kids with a John DeMauro too, and a Paul DeMauro too, with wire crime action methods. Their roles with their look where the DeMauro's market is now where it used to be. In other words, I never seen Paul DeMauro in person, but through a door. He was in a door, and Joe DeMauro was getting scared because or acting like he was scared. The Marines tell people to act fake motivations, specifically to have people pretend they knew people before they did. It's like, for example, the Marines rolls with sequence shifts with the Ninth Circuit Court and Manhattan, New York, which is right next to the World Trade Center attack, as their collusions with names on all sides of the cases and courts at the same time, putting sequence shifts in databases, delusions, but also criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality aspects and natures of collusions. So WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, has a bunch of people intercities and on the sides of Central Connecticut State University and at Central Connecticut State University, involved in drugs and medicines crimes with them and other natures of organized crimes with them. Involved also with sexual and medical offenders of kids, elderly homes, with the security of it too. Both probation court concentrated distinctly from the superior courts and distinctly from the district court of Connecticut, with people increasingly on off the state corrections offices and all of the state judicial branch offices, collusion/S at and next to all natures of crime scenes. At the same time, with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, their lawyers, their sources, all natures of conjunctions to them. And the same thing with the interbranch. At the same time, and the intelligence tied to them. At the same time, putting the same sequence shifts and tricks to cover that predicate acts with facts and methods of them to cover that up. They have whole wire crime acts and methods. They're changing and faking what people say to WFSB or Fox News if you call them on the phones. So that's why we can't leave out the FBI Director Robert Luskin's roles with those locations next to them too. Increasingly, a Mike Pandoff, I only know one of the things he sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. I only know him as one of the a whole bunch of people that are tied to the World Trade Center attack with the other countries' roles, and have also intercities from Wethersfield, interbranch offices, and conjunctions to them. In conjunction to that, they have roles also with the World Trade Center attack in Manhattan, the World Trade Center and the spots next to it, including the court next to it, and all sides in that case that day. Also, again, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists who had time collusions with them, and since to hide it. But this is also everyone just attached to fake and change transcripts. So the interbranch refused to identify themselves legitimately interbranch, because what's actually recorded shows people that have been speaking about crimes, that have been predicate acts of facts, methods. A whole bunch of people at Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut. They have roles with a whole bunch of names that sought me out as complete strangers. I don't even know their names. Some of them, they faked it, like with Joshua Julian on the Facebook page of the principal of sex offenders campus, who also has other FBI and state police and Whiting Forensics, and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, also involved with organized crimes with that campus, and with the Leahy family, also with their daughters on Facebook, with Facebook, and with themselves. Men and women and a Leahy family have multiple prosecutors and judges personally and professionally involved with them, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and putting fake conversations, including about religion, because they have delusions about religions, and they have collusions like with Robert Rodriguez and others on all sides of a church with him, who have collusions planted together on my street from other areas, and ones that weren't even never even in my area. I don't even know them. So in other words, but we need to get them on paper, one name and sequence. There are people involved with credible violent threats, and these are ones with their extended family members also involved with the Saudis attackers, and with FBI and other countries, foreign and domestic military involved with Central Connecticut State University. Mark Violet and Justin Govinsky recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they were influenced to plant fake ties, fake natures, ties to me on my street. And as a group, alone, so then it would look like we were a group that knew each other. And then they make the fake section. Oh, we saw you with each other. They're sequence shifting, and they're hiding what's recorded. I never had a class with Joshua with a bunch of people tied to the Ray Colon, people tied to him, who have been planting evidences, collusions with all natures of crime scenes and next to it. Increasingly has something to do with their conjunctions, the guilt at the corrections offices, or the conjunctions to it or to that. These are people also at elderly homes at the same time where they were exploiting the kids and are exploiting the kids at and between each of the campuses, even exploiting the kids at the public schools and the kids at the private schools with the opposite, so they can't respond properly. There are only three branches of government and makes them self-valued roles, with that being having been used remotely three ways: criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence, and tactically delusions are off, and pretending other. Because the breaching method needs to screen itself as one of the things that nature shows us is true always, that slavery was about. A human fact tribute nature breaching method that had assigned roles with it before America's founders were born, northern colonies and southern colonies. They wanted this clearer than day, understood where and how they did not want anything to do with slavery. And we're supposed to address this, how our presidents are distinct from our founders. They directed us to understand that. It was declassified. And nature itself declassifies this. But you guys have within the nature of debate quality aspects in nature that are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, rock. You came through 6 campuses. So follow mandated law. And they know intercities. They recorded, they confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. I had conversations with people in life I never told anybody about. And why or how I didn't say anything, I already recorded too. They're recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. All natures of investigations, investigators. They time where people are going to go have them say things. They just fake that being haven't been done too. And they do little tricks with it because they know that they won't give up the how the investigators were and are used as collusions with everything that came before them. In other words, that's why how they can't afford to have black people's whites of eyes. Revelations discerned, even though they're increasingly being generated by nature's identity of itself, to the extent we can discern. It comes with its complete identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. And why? Nah. Faith branches. Bah. Who disbelieves? Please, Miss Gabbard, please do what's right. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. Why do I have to leak for them? Well, that's because what they're doing. They're leaking. A whole bunch of people tied to former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, right before a 2006 district court case with him, and long-term before that, and short-term before that, as ones involved with the World Trade Center attack in Manhattan and the spots next to it and the court next to it. They're also same thing, collusion /S at next to the Connecticut news locations. And the same, like Fox Connecticut News. Those same names were our roles on off body dumping spots and the campuses, and time collusions with the principal child abuser. Whole bunch of punk weirdos jumping in and pretending passions and emotions that I didn't even know. I have nothing to do with them. And people I did know, in other words, like Anthony Edmonds, sat silent in the whole class the whole time. Then he's talking like, in other words, he's making confessions too. He has rules, all kinds of social security scams. Also with people with the buildings next to Fox Connecticut News, with the FBI director and co-defendants of his and their family members involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes with the databases at campuses and their family members. Family members of a John LeConte, a Don LeConte is increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders against me, and putting predicate acts with facts in databases with sexual and medical offenders of kids first forced years apart, and still being forced further. Get a better pretend she didn't have pretend I had a word of conversation with her, and get them on paper with her father and the Stadius Grabowski involved too, with some people involved with some Jewish theme, and like this Mike Roberts screaming out sexual things about Alison Mulcahy, with people involved with her with this Thaddeus Grabowski in the Connecticut District Court, with a Brian Silver and a bunch of people with the Britain Superior Court's families and intimate ties, and Hartford's courts. And these are people next to the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices, increasingly involved with predicate acts and identity theft, frauds, federal evidences, crimes, on and off campuses connected to that. And their rules with all names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, putting the same sequence shifts at the same time as them, with criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, not even in those cases at the time, not even a part of those subject treatments, like with which trials are about. You don't bring up what witch trials are about, leaving out how there's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, still with other communicated for it than our founders communicated, have communicated for themselves, and for their use of James Madison's plan to counter extort the other founders, colonists, and Native Americans, and make them break to an extent those crazy laws, even though they would have no means to defend themselves. But they did it to an extent, then they had no means to defend themselves, so they had to rely on our founders' plan. But we are still abridged. We still don't have our founders' free speech allowed, let alone our own. They need a lot of sick fake punks. They make people mad for criminally. They do criminally foreign influence things against people on Facebook. Then they pretend they're extremism, and they block they're lying about the motivations for blocking accounts. Facebook has a Joshua Julian. I don't know where he lives. He's involved with one of the people interstates and foreign on my street, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with some untimely deaths, and more roles with it at Trinity College with people who make confessions on my street. And there's a pattern of that through time. That's why I didn't respond to him. The Robert Rodriguez on my street. And then he yelled over, even though it was about an untimely death. He goes, "Oh, remember that girl you saw me walking with last time? She's dead." In other words, and then I got him to confirm it on Facebook. Robert Rodriguez is one of the ones that brought up the principal child abuser. They hid that from the parents. An officer O'Neill, an intelligence family O'Neill, is involved with a bunch of interstate state police families, with one's named Collo and a Phil Collo. Phil Collo has wire crimes and former mayors and people intermilitary, foreign and domestic, have roles of whiting forensics since I was a kid, involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids at campuses I didn't even go to, and one I went to, but I never had a problem with that principal. His daughter is involved. I never even knew her. They tried to take a picture apparently in 1994. I had no communication with her. There's a Kevin Harris who is reportedly her boyfriend. I don't know if they're married or what, but a Kevin Harris, and that was a Mr. Murphy, the principal's name. These are increasingly people tied to Korea have been lying to him about that, about me behind my back to them, and trying to make fake exceptions that show the same though. But that's why they can't get on paper, and they're switching names into brands, switching sequences. That's why they have such overt criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw factual nature, quality aspects in nature, as we could just discern, because they left out black people's whites of eyes. They left out how through administrations, both sides have roles with the predicate acts and the methods of them. Get me off the fake conversations with Channel 3 News about the World Trade Center attack. And I want a response, right? For what you guys are preventing me from speaking about by attaching me to fake conversations with the people around me about it. and worse. You guys know I recorded. You guys recorded yourself. Worse than criminally incompetent. Collusion/S with all sides occurred, including with that girl who was dragged to her death, even if that was made up. That girl is involved with the ones out on and next to Hartford Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut, who has ties between names next to campuses intercities, involve all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders instances. That's also why and how they have to switch names into branch and put more and more fake things. They're putting predicate acts with facts, collusions with all natures of crime scenes, and worse, at the databases. And that says collusions with the breaching method uses of databases, which is collusion at /S at location /S that no one fathomed. And where and how they could discern it, they have to show they can't afford to have that discerned. Not one has learned. Like saying James Comey is also one of the ones involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with the political branch, and with the executive branch has predicate acts with facts methods like fake phone transcripts, identity theft, fraud, slanders roles. They faked conversations with me at the Withersfield police station when I was a kid, and now as an adult too, with different officers, but there are ties between those people. Increasingly, the educators of the same house /S involved with the confessions of the police, and this Bob Chase, who brought the name Phil Kalal, but they're refusing to give me a legitimate police report. They're just putting a charge and then putting confessions tied to it and changing officers' names, changing names regarding it. So I haven't been giving writings since I was a kid. And the interbranch, the Britain Superior Court, Harvard courts, and the district courts and their families have personal and professional ties, including with doctors at Hartford Hospital, a whole bunch of, and lawyers there, and security with it, and businesses and houses next to it, also involved with this name Kalal and Smith near me. Also being influenced to pretend passions and emotions. Their roles with people from Russia and Ukraine too, against themselves too. They're here and there, right through world wars, Russia and America, Germany. They all had collusions. France, they had collusions with psychiatry tied to courts and prisons. They have the audacity to speak about crimes. They had collusions at each age and nature of fact, treatment nature. Black people. Yeah. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, please, people who disbelieves. Judges in Napolitano, do what's right. Get them on paper.